Good evening, folks. Ken Ring here, www.predictweather.com, and I just want to say a word or two about the Philippine event, which we're still all in total shock over, watching the news events and the misery of the illness that's starting to sweep the region now, the homelessness, the absolute helplessness that these people have. It's been called the worst ever storm. I don't know that it has been, and I think there's a tendency to hype that kind of thing up. For instance, over the past 1,000 years, the Philippines have actually been hit by between 10 and 20,000 tropical cyclones, which they call typhoons around that particular area. It's an Asian word, but they're all the same. Cyclones, hurricanes are what they call them in America, and they're the same system. Now, these systems mostly generate themselves when the moon comes closer to the Earth, which it does every 27 1/3 days. And it came closer this particular time on the 6th of November. That was what we call the perigee. It was quite a close one. It was the 8th closest for the whole year. There are generally 13 or 14 of them in a year. So it was by no means a small one. And it was in what we call the cyclone season, the hurricane season. It was actually towards the end of the hurricane season in the northern hemisphere. It's only just starting now in the southern hemisphere. And we're starting to see activity appear just south of the equator, in the area of the Solomons and Vanuatu. These tropical cyclones, storms, depressions happening around in the perigee times, and they're going to be a feature of the summer coming up. But more of that later. Bad as it is, watching these news reports of the Philippines, we have to get a little bit level-headed about it and not into hype about global warming, climate change, and the fact that because Westerners are driving around in cars and SUVs putting carbon dioxide into the air, that it is actually causing these kind of events. Look, flop open any page of the Bible on any page and you will see tempests, storms, floods of huge epic proportions, and people leaving whole cities because of earthquake damage, and people always on the move away from nature's wrath. It is nothing new. But what has made it worse in the Philippines, of course, is the immense overcrowding that happens there. There is overcrowding in a lot of the third world countries, and many of these severe events are made worse by the fact that there are corrupt administrations that simply do not look after their people. There's immense corporate wealth, and when you have immense wealth, you can only really get it by having immense poverty. And that's, what humans seem to, what can we say, seem to be guilty of a lot. This kind of greed that occurs at a bank level, a government level sometimes, leads to, of course, corruptions, wars, oppressions, class and caste systems, and things like ethnic cleansing and racism. But it has nothing to do with the earth, nothing to do with climate, nothing to do with how many resources there are. And yet it gets blamed on that. Why? Well, to deflect responsibility away from the mismanagement of civilizations and the fact that governments can't look after their people properly. In places like the Philippines and Pakistan and Indonesia, really it wouldn't cost much to house people better and to build more substantial structures, not all substandard, so that they just get blown away like matchwood whenever a strong wind comes. And the floods of Pakistan and India are another example. Every year, thousands die because of these events, and possibly they don't need to. Not that it has been the most destructive storm either that ever was. If you go up north, the far north of New Zealand, you'll see kauri trees lying horizontal underneath the sand. 2 layers of them, which indicate a couple of really strong storms back in our geological history. We don't really know much about that except that they're down there, and we have to take from that there have probably been massive storms at some time in the past in New Zealand, even though we seldom get tropical cyclones coming as far south as this. So what else happened around that particular time that the Philippines cyclone hurricane started to develop? Well, that was about the 6th and 7th of November. There were 2 earthquakes in Tauranga on the 7th. There was a 5 magnitude. There was also a 4.5. They were about 600 kilometres away, but they were unusually large, and they came at that time. Normally, we get earthquakes maybe one every couple of days, and it's between 2, 3, sometimes a 4, but not that often. But a 5 is an unusual event. Normally you only get 5s around perigees. So why was there such intense activity? Well, between the 4th and the 6th was the new moon and the perigee, and the southern declination of the moon. It was the furthest point south, and there was great sunspot activity between the 6th and the 8th. In other words, the sun was on fire, the sun was active, the sun was sending out magnetic solar radiation which affects Earth's electromagnetic field. When it does that, it puts stress and strain on the whole of the environment, if you like, the electrical environment around Earth, and it helps to create, we're still not sure how, extra tides, extra stress that translates into thunderstorms and earthquakes, and consequently whatever happens in the air, these thunderstorms and cyclones. So there were storms all over the planet, as we would expect from that kind of activity just outside of the planet. There were record-breaking storms in Darwin and Townsville on the 6th of November. On the 7th of November, South Australia got a belting. Port Lincoln got a huge dump of rain. The Nullarbor Desert got more rain, got the heaviest rain for 20 years on the 7th of November. You've got to say, well, that's a bit unusual, that's a bit coincidental, what's happening there? Well, it's not coincidence. It's that there was this global phenomenon of extra stress that translated itself into certain severe events at certain spots. For example, the Philippines. There were downpours in the Upper North Island down here on the 7th, and there was a whole lot of thunder. So, of course, all these events are connected up. It's a week later now, and the activity has all subsided. Well, not all, because the remnants of the Philippines cyclone made its way down to Korea and Japan, and because, it took a while, it's like a Catherine wheel, it takes a while to subside. But what's happened now is the activity has mostly subsided, along with the tides, along with the sunspots, along with the earthquake clusters, and much of the severe weather. So that has now passed, and we're into a calmer time. In a couple of days' time, things are heating up again because of the full moon. The full moon brings its own particular set of destructive weather. That's going to be around the 16th. I'm expecting a lot of rain in New Zealand between the 18th and the 19th. So more of that in a later posting. But for now, thanks for watching, and let's still continue to think very sympathetically towards the people of the Philippines and what they're having to go through at this time.